My life was pretty simple. I live on a large plot of land, with a beautiful river running right through it. For years I've spent my autumns chopping wood, stocking up for the long, cold winters. It's not just a hobby, it's how I heat my home and keep my family warm. It's a tradition, a necessity, and honestly, a lot of hard work, but I love it. The smell of fresh-cut pine, the satisfaction of a perfectly stacked woodpile, it's my little slice of heaven. Then, they built the luxury homes downstream, and with them came the HOA, and with the HOA came Karen. From day one she had a problem with me. My truck was too loud, my dog barked at a squirrel, but her main obsession, my woodpile. Apparently, my neatly stacked, essential for survival stockpile of firewood was an eyesore. She claimed it lowered the aesthetic value of a precious gated community. I received letters, then fines, all of which I ignored. This was my land, my wood, my business. The property line was clear. The HOA had zero jurisdiction over me. I even had my lawyer send them a cease and desist letter, just to make it crystal clear. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. One crisp October evening, I was coming home when I saw it. A plume of black smoke rising from my property. My heart hammered against my ribs. I floored it, skidding to a stop in my driveway. The sight that greeted me was pure horror. My entire winter's wood supply, months of back-breaking labor, was a raging inferno. And standing there, with a smug, triumphant look on her face, was Karen, a gaskin still in her hand. My neighbors were already there, trying to douse the flames with garden hoses, their faces a mixture of shock and anger. I just stared, numb. All that work, all that security for my family, gone up in smoke because this woman didn't like the view. The firefighters arrived and managed to contain the blaze before it reached my house, but the woodpile was a total loss. When the police questioned Karen, her excuse was beyond belief. She said the woodpile was a fire hazard. The irony was so thick you could choke on it. She actually admitted, right there, to starting the fire to eliminate what she perceived as a fire hazard. The police arrested her on the spot for arson and destruction of property. But for me, seeing her in handcuffs wasn't enough. My family would be cold this winter, my peace had been shattered. Justice felt hollow. As I stood there, watching the smoldering remains of my hard work, a thought sparked in my mind, a cold, calculating thought. I looked at the river flowing through my land. For generations, my family had managed the old spillway and dam upstream. It was our responsibility, a legacy passed down. We used it to control water levels, prevent flooding on our own property, and manage the local ecosystem. The new development downstream had been built on a floodplain, something their developers conveniently forgot to mention. They counted on my family continuing to manage the river for their benefit, for free. They took our kindness for granted, just like Karen had. That night, I couldn't sleep. The image of the fire, of Karen's smug face, played on a loop. I thought about the winter ahead, the extra cost of buying firewood, the stress on my family. And then I thought about the spillway. The HOA had declared war on me. They had destroyed my property. They thought they were untouchable in their fancy houses. It was time to remind them that some things are beyond their control. Some things, like nature and a man pushed too far, have a way of balancing the scales. The plan was simple. The plan was legal. The plan was perfect karma. The next morning I drove up to the old dam. The mechanism was ancient but reliable, a series of heavy cast-iron gears and levers that controlled the spillway gates. For decades, we'd kept the gates mostly closed during the fall and winter to maintain a steady, gentle flow downstream. It protected their million-dollar homes from the seasonal swelling of the river. It was a courtesy, nothing more, a courtesy they no longer deserved. With a heavy grunt, I started turning the main wheel. Gear by gear, inch by inch, I began to open the spillway. Not all the way, just enough to return the river to its natural, untamed flow. I went back home and waited. The weather forecast was on my side. A series of heavy autumn storms were rolling in, exactly as they did every year. Usually I'd be managing the dam, carefully adjusting the flow to prevent any issues downstream. This year I just watched the rainfall. I watched the river on my property begin to rise, swelling with a downpour. It was a powerful, beautiful sight. Water churned, no longer a gentle stream but a forceful current, exactly as nature intended. I knew that downstream, where the riverbanks had been landscaped and manicured to the edge, things would be very different. The first call came 2 days later. It was from the HOA president, a man I'd never spoken to. His voice was frantic. "You have to close the dam, the river is rising. Our yards are flooding." I let him panic for a moment before calmly replying, "I'm not sure what you mean. This is the river's natural flow. My family has been generously regulating it for you, free of charge, for years. But after recent events, I'm no longer willing to provide that service. My property's fine, by the way. It's on higher ground." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. The water kept rising. What started as flooded lawns quickly became swamped patios. Then, the water started seeping into their walkout basements and garages, the luxury cars, the expensive outdoor furniture, the perfectly manicured gardens. All of it was being swallowed by the muddy river water. The local news crews showed up. Helicopters hovered overhead, capturing dramatic footage of the unprecedented flooding in the exclusive community. They interviewed distraught homeowners who wailed about their ruined property and blamed the freak weather. No one mentioned the man upstream who had simply stopped doing them a favor. The HOA called an emergency meeting and, in a moment of sheer desperation, they invited me. I walked into their fancy clubhouse, tracking a bit of mud on their pristine carpets, and faced a room full of angry, panicked faces. They demanded I close the spillway. They threatened to sue. I just smiled. Sue me for what? I asked. For not using my private property and my personal labor to protect your poorly planned development. You built on a floodplain. As for your threats, I believe my lawyer already has a pretty strong case against your organization, starting with a member who committed arson on my property. Then, I made my offer. I told them I would consider resuming management of the river, but there were conditions. First, the HOA would pay, in full, for the replacement of my entire winter wood supply, delivered and stacked. Second, they would pay for the installation of a state-of-the-art security system on my property. Third, they would issue a formal, public apology. And fourth, they would pay me an annual water management fee, a hefty one. The alternative, I would let the river do what it wanted, and they could invest in canoes. They were trapped. They argued, they blustered, but in the end they had no choice. The water was still rising. They agreed to every single one of my demands. The next day, a check was delivered to my door, and a crew arrived with a mountain of seasoned hardwood. Karen was facing serious jail time, and her house, ironically, had some of the worst water damage. The river eventually receded, leaving behind a trail of mud, ruin, and humility. The story became a local legend. Some call me a hero, others a villain. But as I sit here now, in my warm house, listening to the crackle of a fire fueled by my enemy's panic, I just feel a sense of peace. They learned a valuable lesson. Don't mess with a man's firewood. You might just get burned or, in their case, flooded. Thanks for listening, and if you enjoyed this story, be sure to like and subscribe for more.